Tell us about your cognitive apprenticeship.
The cognitive apprenticeship is quite fascinating. It was something that I discovered just as I was beginning to create this particular training program. I had thought about it for a good couple years because I always taught in small hands-on groups. And I didn't see how to teach bigger groups because the material is complex and sophisticated enough that, in my experience, unless I got you doing it on your script, that it was abstract enough so that even if you listen to an explanation of it, then when you go home and try to do it on your own partially formed script, you generally don't have enough know-how and experience and just general knowledge and working know-how to use it across a broad spectrum of ideas. So I spent a couple of years trying to figure out how to teach larger groups. And in the process of that, I also studied the science of how people learn. And that has grown and changed tremendously in the last 100 years and hugely in the last 50 years. They've figured out so much about the science of how people learn, to the point where they even have people in an MRI and they're doing experiments on them, teaching them things and seeing which parts of their brain light up and all that, so that they understand much more completely how people learn. They've even figured out that in the process of acquiring an expert skill, that the brain creates a neural network specifically for the acquisition and retention of that particular skill. And the more that you practice it with complete attention and strong intention, that this neural network, you can picture it like a dirt road which connects two sections of the brain very close together, and the signal travels from one to the other. And the more you diligently practice, like if you're learning to be a baseball pitcher and you practice over and over and really stay focused with a good coach, that neural network gets enhanced. It literally grows and changes. And what they found is that the brain does what's called myelination. It's a fatty coating that insulates that neural network from outside chatter. So it gets more focused, and that myelination continues, so that neural network literally gets broader and faster. And so it turns into an information superhighway where it used to be a dirt road. And so the people that have substantial expert skills, it's built into their brain and it will never go away. It does not go away. So like, for instance, when I was a kid, I did a lot of games like Skittle Bowl, which is a thing on a ball on a chain, and you send it around and it comes in and you're bowling. And I did that, thousands of times, and I got quite good with the motion. So that there was one game where it's two steel rods connected at one end, and there's a steel ball, and you have to squeeze the rods together, and that forces the ball to go slightly uphill. And it's really hard to master because the ball keeps falling through. It's a touch where you're letting it roll downhill slightly and squeezing them together so it keeps going up, and you gradually work it up. And I got really good at that when I was like 12 or something. I did it constantly. And I saw one in somebody's house a couple years ago. I went up to it, I was like, oh, I used to be able to do this. And I tried it. And on the very first try, I did it perfectly. This is like really, really hard to do. And so it shows you like that once it's really seated in your brain at that level, that it's permanent. In the process of studying this fascinating material about the science of learning and looking at how I taught, because I didn't want to teach the same way I did. I didn't find it effective enough to do a 30-hour intensive, which is very much like fire hose teaching, where I'm just hammering you with a complex array of information that's not easy to retain. And I always felt dissatisfied, like I could do more, I could do better. They could come away from my training with very substantial skills instead of some sense of it and really excited about it. And so I pulled a lot of interesting stuff together and teaching techniques. And then a week before lockdown hit, I sat down and started building this particular training program full time. And then COVID hit, and I had even more time because I wasn't driving the kids around and that kind of stuff. So I really focused, and I found this essay. One of the books on the science of learning talked about these people who did some interesting stuff with the science of learning. I looked them up and found an essay they had written about cognitive apprenticeship, which is built upon a standard apprenticeship, which is how people learn best. Working with a master to become a shoemaker, barrel maker, that kind of thing. That's been around for thousands of years. And so all of that is still there. It's still very much an apprenticeship. But the cognitive apprenticeship has to do with the cognitive skills that accompany some sorts of training processes. Like, for instance, if you're apprenticing to a lawyer, say, they wouldn't call it apprenticeship these days, but you're still studying right with people in the law. Sure, there's lots of stuff of like how you do things and what you say in court and the technicalities of the law, but so much of it is cognitive facility of how you think. So the process of how you think, from one point of view, is everything in a skill set like that. So it was fascinating in that as I'm sitting down to create this training program, and it's going to be a 2-year training program for writers in the craft of the dramatist, that I found this 30-page essay. And as I'm reading it, I'm going like, this is like to the T exactly what I'm doing. So it was like finding, a high-performing rocket fuel right when you're building a rocket. Like, you didn't know you even needed it, and then somebody shows up with this stuff and it changes everything. So I spent a month reading these 30-page essay over and over again. Read it once, yellow highlight, then went over that and pink highlight, and then worked with that and typed up all the highlighted things and sorted them for prioritization and categorization and put them on 3x5 cards and like, okay, I need to put this into this part of training someone in the craft of the dramatist. And it really consolidated and amplified so much of what I was doing. And the craft of the dramatist is so much, it's more a way of thinking than a set of rules. It's the habits of mind of a trained dramatist is what I'm training people in. And that's what it's always been. But these people were talking about exactly that, the habits of mind that go along with teaching something sophisticated to people. So it was a fully developed science that through a couple of years of hard work, I hit upon just at the right moment. And I really built that into the course in every way possible so that I was constantly using what I had learned about the science of how people learn, the science of cognitive apprenticeship, and the science of training for expertise. I was always using that to change how I teach, to the point where I would finish one lesson and be getting ready to start another whole tool. And one of the things they talk about, I'm not sure if it was in cognitive apprenticeship or in the science of expertise. The science of expertise is quite fascinating. This fellow named Anders Ericsson created it in 1983. It was not a science before that. He started visiting these training facilities around the world that turned out disproportionately large numbers of high-level ballerinas, chess players, Olympic ski champions, all these highly specialized skills. And some people were turning out substantial experts more than anybody else. So he went and visited them and hung out with them and studied what they were doing, and took all the stuff that he learned from these coaches and studied it scientifically, and then took it even further. And he died this summer, but his last book, called Peak, really synthesized it all really substantially. And that's considered the high watermark in the world of training expertise. This guy invented the science, changed the whole thing, and then the last book is the high watermark, and that's required reading in my course. It's course material for the class. So one of the things they talk about, either in the Science of Learning or Peak in the Science of Expertise, is that they've found that the harder it is to learn something, the better you retain it. So what I did, so they talk about changing gears, pulling the rug out from under the students, flipping things on their head, making them work for it, all these ways to make them more independent and aggressive and proactive as learners means that it sticks much better in them, because you want permanent, substantial know-how, not mere knowledge. If you know stuff about things, that doesn't mean you can actually do it at a professional level just because you have knowledge about it. So I finished one course and I was getting ready to, one lesson, and I was changing to another whole topic. And I was like, okay, so how can I utilize what I've learned best now that I'm starting a whole new area? And one of the things they've found that's quite fascinating is that if you make people tackle a problem before they've been trained in it, that it makes them better students, better thinkers. For instance, in math, a teacher would give you a problem that you're not equipped to solve yet and that you haven't been trained in yet. And the teacher would say, look, I'm not trying to get you to solve it. I just want you to wrestle with it. Take a whack at it, see what you can do. And then when the teacher explains the tool later on, and the teacher is showing one complex part of that equation, and the teacher says, so here's the trick for how you do this particular thing, instead of the students being there like, I hate this stuff, they're like, oh, that's how you do that. Wow, look at that. They're invested in it. They've already done part of the work, and they're aggressive, independent thinkers really trying to learn it rather than bored kids wishing they were out playing Frisbee or whatever. So it's a specific methodology of teaching that has proven to work. And so I brought that in as much as I could into training in the craft of the dramatist, so that I will give my students a complex idea that I haven't trained them in yet and ask them to just think it through. And it's an exercise called Think It Through. Just think about it for 15 minutes and then write for 5 minutes. And I'm not expecting you to get it right. Some of you know more than others, and you will. Some of you don't know anything, but take a whack at it. Like, what's the difference between a storyteller and a dramatist? There's real distinctions. And someone with more experience would understand that. Someone who doesn't might have trouble with it, but they can wrestle with it and they can think about it. And whatever thinking they do adds up, and it informs their learning process, and it turns them into more sophisticated students. For instance, one of the things in my class is that not only do I not answer, I only really teach one thing, the craft of the dramatist, and I don't answer any questions about anything else because I want the focus, and I don't want questions that are unrelated. And I don't answer stupid questions where I'll say, no, you go think about that some more. You're just tossing out a dumb question. Like, you see that a lot on like Facebook writer groups where people post these really dumb questions like, should my protagonist's girlfriend have red hair? It's like, first of all, who cares? But why are you asking us? That's my main reaction is, you can't figure that out on your own. It's like, you're a writer. Get some grit, dig in and figure it out. And so that all factors into the cognitive apprenticeship because I'm teaching them how to think and how to process and how to tackle things at a professional level. And so that by the time they've gone through the program, they will be much more aggressive, independent thinkers, and they also learn to evaluate their own ideas. You have to be able to generate ideas, and you also have to be able to evaluate them. Because you can make up stuff all day long, but if half of it's no good and you can't tell the difference, it doesn't do anybody any good. You're not going to sell it. It's not working. So one of the things I do is that in the forum with the groups of students, I might give them an assignment if we're all working on the same script. I'd say, okay, we got to figure out a way that she can sneak the gun into this room before the meeting. And it has to be good. It can't be some stupid idea. So your assignment is to come up with 10 different ways she could sneak the gun into the room. And then before they post their answer on the forum that everybody can see, I say, then look at your ideas and bubble sort them. Let the best ones bubble to the top. So your top 3 are good. And then post them, and then everybody look at everybody else's and take the best of all those and bubble sort those into the best so that what you bring me is the top 30 out of what may be hundreds or more ideas. And then I'm making them do the work so that they're gaining skill at creating, evaluating, collaborating, which is also very important in the entertainment industry. And they can work as a team to present me with ideas that are everywhere from very good to incredibly good to off the charts good. And some of them might be so good that we're like, wow, that's a whole screenplay on itself. Let's park that over here and make that into something, so that it's a way of just making them into professional storytellers on top of seasoned, versatile dramatists, because you got to have both. Great storytelling without craft as a dramatist, it still won't be stage-worthy. It won't work as a performance piece that actors can act and will grip an audience. And mere structure isn't worth very much either. Well-structured crap is still crap. It just runs like a Swiss watch. So you really got to have both. And so the cognitive apprenticeship is apprenticeship in the craft of the dramatist, how to make a story work dramatically, and the craft of storytelling, and the whole thought processes that go into all of that is crucial, because how you think is how you mold your story and how you dramatize it, and just your general attack as a storyteller. So you're coming up with things that are fresh and things that aren't, just cliche and easy to come up with. So it's about challenging them and making them work for it and really bringing up their level of expertise and their cognitive facilities. And then there's one more layer in cognitive apprenticeship, which is that you not only need the actual hard skill, but you also need the cognitive facility, the subtle thinking habits and often hidden thinking habits that the expert has, some of which the expert doesn't even know they're doing. So by spending time with them, you gradually see how they tackle a problem, even if they're not aware of all of it, because they may have forgotten a bunch of it 20 years ago, or sort of invented it subconsciously, or just have good habits because of all their training. And so in addition to the hard skill and the cognitive facility, there's also what's called metacognition, which is the ability to evaluate your own cognitive process, to get above your own professional thinking process and go, I think I was going about this all wrong. Like what I was doing was correct, but I think I'm like in the wrong ballpark. So the ability to look at your thinking and go, God, I think I was completely wrong about that whole part of it. And then you may invent a whole new way to do it, or just change gears, or, maybe you had a team of 10 people working on a project for you, and you realize that they didn't need, one person doing it for 2 days could do what they were trying to do 10 people in 2 weeks. But the other part of the problem, you should have had 30 people on for the last 3 months, because you noticed how much more significant this one piece of the puzzle was when you stepped back and looked at your own cognitive process. So it's the ability to master your own mastery in a certain way. And that's a key component of cognitive apprenticeship as well. But it's a full bunch of skill sets, and it really lends itself well to training people in the craft of script writing.